Hey, what's going on, guys? This Saturday is UFC 297, Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis for the middleweight title. And I'm going to go through the entire main card, briefly discuss each fight, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to grade UFC 297 on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst card ever, 10 being the greatest card of all time. And I'm going to answer the question whether or not UFC 297 is worth your money. Now, before I get into talking about each fight, what are the factors that I look at as most important when grading a UFC pay-per-view? And these are in no particular order, but one is the relevance of a fight. How important is it to the division? Is it a title fight? Is it a contender fight? Next, is it a fan-friendly matchup on paper? Does it look like it'll be a super exciting fight? And lastly, the skill level of each fighter. Are they bottom of the barrel or are they the elite of the elite? Now, before I get into discussing each fight, take a look at the full pay-per-view main card and comment down below on a scale from 1 to 10, what grade would you give UFC 297 before you even hear my opinion? Now, starting off with the first fight that opens up the pay-per-view main card, we have Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev. In my opinion, this is the second best fight on the card. Like, if we're ranking it by importance of fights or my intrigue in fights, this is the co-main event. Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev is a banger featherweight matchup, and it's a very important fight in the division. I believe both guys are ranked currently in the top 10. This is a big step up in competition for Movsar Evloev, who's 17-0 right now. Then Arnold Allen's coming off a loss against Max Holloway, which was his first loss in a long while. And honestly, you have Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria at UFC 298. If Volkanovski holds on to his featherweight title, the next challenger could potentially come out of Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev. So this fight kind of really checks all the boxes because it's a fan-friendly matchup. I know people will say, oh, Movsar is a grappler. He has decent striking as well. He showed that against Dan Ige. He had an incredible fight against Diego Lopez in his last fight. I know that was primarily grappling, but that was a short-notice matchup against Diego Lopez. That was a super exciting fight. Arnold Allen traditionally is in rather exciting fights. I remember he beat the brakes off of Dan Hooker not that long ago, as well as he had a very intriguing fight against Max Holloway. He clearly lost, but it was still an intriguing fight. And I think both these guys are very, very high level. I think it's relevant to the division, and I think this is a big step up for Movsar Evloev and the winner of this fight. Potentially, if Volkanovski hangs onto his belt, the next title challenger could literally come out of Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev. So in terms of importance of a fight, this could literally be a number one contender fight in the featherweight division, and we may not even know it yet. Because if Volkanovski wins, who else is next? Because he's fought pretty much everyone in the featherweight division. So Arnold Allen, I'm not sure where he's currently ranked in the UFC official rankings, but he's somewhere up there near the top 5. So if Movsar beats him, he's 17-0, he's undefeated, he goes out there and beats Arnold Allen. Let's say he finishes Arnold Allen. He's got to be right up there in title discussion to fight Alexander Volkanovski if Volkanovski's still the champion, because we need some fresh contenders in the division. So it's a pretty easy path to the title right now if Volkanovski hangs on to his featherweight title. So overall, I love that fight. I think it's a high-quality matchup. I think it's a fan-friendly fight, and I think it's a super high-level, important fight as well. Moving up on the card, we have Chris Curtis versus Marc-Andre Barriault. I think this is an intriguing matchup. I think this is borderline striker versus grappler. Both guys are relatively well-rounded, but I think Chris Curtis clearly has a significant boxing advantage. So I'm wondering how this fight plays out, even though I suspect that Chris Curtis will be able to stuff the takedowns and land on the feet. But both guys have really good gas tanks. It's not super relevant to the middleweight division, but Chris Curtis, I believe, is ranked number 14 or 15 right now in the UFC official rankings. So it's somewhat relevant to the division because if Chris Curtis loses, he gets booted out of the rankings. Marc-Andre Barriault wins, he gets into the rankings. Chris Curtis wins, he probably gets a step up in competition in his next fight. So it is relevant to the middleweight division, and both guys are fun to watch. I mean, Marc-Andre Barriault is pretty much always exciting in his fights. I know his last win was against Eric Anders, but the fight before that against Julian Marquez was pretty exciting as well. Chris Curtis has kind of been on a string of bad luck. He fought Nasruddin Imavov, got headbutted in that fight, ended up being a no contest. He lost the fight before that against Kelvin Gastelum, where he suffered a headbutt that dropped him in the second round. So he's kind of been in a string of bad luck, but Chris Curtis is always fun to watch. Excellent body shots, nasty power. I mean, that KO over Joaquin Buckley was sick. It wasn't really that long ago. So I think on paper, this is a fan-friendly matchup. It matters to the division just in the slightest. And also, I think both guys are relatively high-level fighters and I think it'll make for an exciting matchup. So I'm looking forward to that matchup. Moving up on the card, the featured fight on the main card, we have Neil Magny versus Mike Malott. I'm going to be honest, I really don't have that much interest in this fight. You know, I understand, you know, Neil Magny's fighting someone that isn't 2 years old at this point against Mike Malott. And Mike Malott, this fight is just made to kind of catapult him into kind of a star in Canada. They're looking for that next kind of superstar in Canada. And not that I'm saying Mike Malott with the win here is going to be some mega star there, but we've already seen the attention he got at the press conference. The UFC's looking to build up that fan base in Canada. And they just said, you know what, let's give him the dead body of Neil Magny. That's basically what's going on here. So I'm not really all that interested in this matchup. Neil Magny, you know, he's been trading wins and losses for the last couple years. Ian Machado Gary beat the brakes off of him in his last fight. And Mike Malott has looked better than ever in his last few fights. So I know this is a step up in competition for Mike Malott. It is relevant to the division because Neil Magny, I think, is ranked right on the outskirts of the top 15. So it is relevant to the division. Even though Neil Magny is becoming a dead body, he's still relatively high level. I mean, he's got, you know, he really tests guys wrestling and clinch work. Like if you're not really, really good with your wrestling and clinch, Neil Magny will expose you. We've seen that in the past. We've even seen that against Jeff Neal, who's now had a career resurgence. So it'll kind of test Mike Malott there, but I expect this to be kind of a one-sided win for Mike Malott. I think Neil Magny's on the downslope. I think he's getting older. I think he's slowing down. I think he's taking a lot of damage. So I really am, you know, I think this is just one of those fights. Okay, if you're interested in finishes, you probably will see a finish. I think Neil Magny's taken so much damage, especially in his last fight. I suspect he'll probably get hurt in this fight and maybe get submitted. I think that was my official prediction, was Mike Malott, second round sub. But overall, this is like a prelim fight. He's only on the main card. Mike Malott is only on the main card because he's from Canada. That's it. So not that I don't enjoy watching Mike Malott fight, not that I don't think maybe he's entering the prime of his career, maybe he's going to be a legit contender. This is his opportunity. He'll jump into the top 15 after this if he beats Neil Magny, and then we'll really see a tough test for Mike Malott in his next fight if he's able to get through Neil Magny. But basically, Neil Magny is doing what Neil Magny does, and he is the gatekeeper of the top 15 here in the welterweight division. So this fight, while neither guy is bottom of the barrel, while it is somewhat relevant to the division, I just don't see it being all that competitive, and that's why I'm kind of down on this fight a bit. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Raquel Pennington versus Myra Bueno Silva for the vacant women's bantamweight title. I'm going to be honest, I'm not one of these people that is just habitually hating on women's MMA. I don't care about this fight at all. Raquel Pennington isn't even fun to watch. She arguably lost her last fight against Ketlin Vieira. She's never in exciting fights. I mean, she went to decision with Aspen Ladd. She's getting out-grappled by Aspen Ladd in the third round. And Myra Bueno Silva, she's coming off a no contest against Holly Holm, which, you know, it is what it is. They're basically counting it as a win because it was ADHD medicine that she didn't get out of her system quick enough. Something along those lines. Now, this fight is relevant to the division because the winner's going to be holding the title. But the division, the women's bantamweight division is dead right now. I mean, it's a dead body, essentially. And the UFC really hasn't put a lot of investment into the women's bantamweight division. And you have a matchup here that I don't even see as super competitive. I mean, Raquel Pennington, when's the last time she's really went out there and dominated someone? I mean, split decision against Ketlin Vieira, I thought she lost. Decision win over Aspen Ladd. Okay, she guillotined Macy Chaston. Before that, she's going to decision with Pani Kianzad. Before that, a decision against the dead body of Mariana Renault. Lost to Holly Holm. Beat Irene Aldana, which actually is a decent win. Has aged decently well, but that's 2019. Lost to Jermaine Duranamine. Lost to Amanda Nunes. Going through her losses. I mean, it's just, I think in this matchup, I'm fairly confident Myra Bueno Silva gets it done. Luckily, Myra Bueno Silva is exciting, but I just think the level of talent right now in the women's bantamweight division is just so low. It's just so low right now. And there's not a lot of interesting matchups even coming out of this fight. It is for the belt, so it is a very important fight. But on paper, I think it's an easy win for Myra Bueno Silva. And, you know, I really don't even think, like, I just think some of the women's divisions haven't evolved as much. Like 115, fair enough. 125, fair enough. I think there's a lot of high skill level fighters in both those weight classes. Bantamweight division, I feel like it's stuck in a time machine. I mean, I feel like we're back still in 2015. It hasn't changed. I mean, I'm not looking forward to this matchup. I'm not looking forward to the future of the division. The UFC needs to start investing some money into the women's bantamweight division and signing some free agents or finding some talent or doing something to maybe seal the fate of the division in the future to get some talent there. But right now, the division looks horrible. I suspect this will be a one-sided fight. I suspect Mayra Bueno Silva probably gets an early submission, but you never know. Raquel Bennington is kind of gritty, so maybe Mayra Bueno Silva gets it done, but this is just not co-main event worthy. This is one of those women's title fights you throw on a card when you want to say, oh, we got 3 title fights. That's all this is. This is a placeholder. I'm not looking forward to this fight at all, and I don't really care all that much about Raquel Pennington versus Mayra Bueno Silva. Moving up on the card to the main event, we have Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis for the middleweight title. I absolutely love this fight. I'm happy that for a change, we're not getting WWE-style matchmaking. Dricus is the #1 contender. He's getting his rightfully earned title shot. How could he not get a title shot after starching Robert Whittaker at UFC 290? And this is a great matchup. I think stylistically, this is actually a tough fight to pick. I know a lot of people are picking Dricus Du Plessis, but I think this is a very tough fight to pick because on one hand, I can see Dricus going out there and starching Sean Strickland the first 2 rounds. But on the other hand, Sean Strickland is very durable, has very good technical boxing. He's hard to hit. And on top of that, he has an unlimited gas tank, and he looks like he's in better shape than he's been in his entire career. So this could be one of those fights where Dricus goes out there, starts beating the brakes off of Strickland. Similar, Abus really gassed after 3 minutes, but similar to the way Abus was winning the first round against Strickland. And then all of a sudden, Strickland can rally back. And also, Dricus is never in a boring fight, and he really is willing to go out there and die. I mean, this guy is an absolute savage. So this matchup has everything you could possibly want. Both guys, super high level, the elite of the elite. I mean, Sean Strickland was underrated for years, and he goes out there and beats Israel Adesanya on a short notice title shot. And then you have Dricus Du Plessis, this is the most... Who would have ever thought this fight would even happen, to be quite honest? Who would have ever thought this is for the undisputed middleweight title? Dricus Du Plessis, against all odds, goes out there and beats Robert Whittaker. So think about that. I mean, everyone's thinking Adesanya's clearly going to beat Strickland. Everyone's thinking Whittaker's clearly going to beat Du Plessis. And instead, they both win, and now they're fighting each other at UFC 297. And this is an incredible matchup. Stylistically, it's a very interesting clash. I know it's not grappler versus striker. Technically, you could say Du Plessis does have the grappling advantage. But this is a fight that is really going to be very interesting. I'm very curious who dictates the forward pressure. I think that'll be very telling for who ends up winning the fight. And Du Plessis, I know Strickland's always talking about, to the death and this and that. Strickland goes out there and pumps the jab, and that's really it. He's kind of usually in boring fights. Dricus Du Plessis is never in a boring fight. I mean, think about it. Robert Whittaker goes out there and starches him. The Darren Till fight was crazy. The Derek Brunson fight was crazy. The fight against Trevin Giles was crazy, and I can't even remember all the other opponents. Brad Tavares was a crazy fight as well. So Dricus is never in a boring fight. He's willing to go out there and die. He's willing to pressure forward and look for a KO. So I'm really looking forward to this main event. High stakes on the line, elite of the elite, and also a super fan-friendly matchup because both guys like to move forward. So I absolutely love the main event, and I really truly do believe that Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for UFC 297 because outside of that, I'm looking at these fights. I'm looking at Neil Magny, Mike Malott. I'm looking at Chris Curtis versus Marc-Andre Barriault. And, Arnold Allen, Movsar Evloev, I think does belong to be on a pay-per-view, but I feel like the other matchups are just like main card of a fight night worthy. That's what I feel like they're truly worthy of. So I feel like UFC 297 is kind of a letdown for the Canadian fans. And it's not like, and I know I'm just talking about the main card here, but it's not like there's any real gems sprinkled out over the prelims. The prelims are what they are. They're not horrible. They're not great either. I wish the UFC would give Canada a banger card. They do deserve it. They are some crazy fans. So overall, on a scale from 1 to 10, I am going to give UFC 297 a 2 out of 10. It just doesn't have enough substance to it. It's really a one-fight main card. It's a one super intriguing fight. And then you have Arnold Allen, Movsar Evloev, which could be like a main event of like an Apex card, which I think is a really solid fight, to be quite honest. But it's not, the rest of the fights on the card they're just decent matchups. There's nothing really to get fired up about or excited about. So I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10. Is it worth your money? If you can live without seeing Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis, I wouldn't pay $85 for this pay-per-view. You know, I need to watch all these fights. I'm excited for most of these fights. But for $85, if I'm just a fan who's kind of on the fringe of potentially buying this pay-per-view, I'm probably not selling out 85 bucks. Also, if you don't want to buy the pay-per-view, I'll be streaming live Saturday while I'm watching the fights if you care to join me. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. But overall, 2 out of 10 fight card. Would not purchase this pay-per-view if I'm just kind of on the fringe and I'm not a massive fan, or I don't really pay super close attention to the sport and know every fighter. Outside of the main event, you know, it's not a lot of value for kind of like those fringe casual fans. But let me know what you guys think of my grade down in the comments. Am I being too harsh on UFC 297? I also think it took a hit when you kind of, and I'm not really super into this, but I'm talking about it from other people's perspective, but I was kind of a little bit intrigued in the beef between them two. Now they're hugging each other and Strickland's talking about, oh, we're going to go nipple to nipple and dick to dick. And Strickland's just being nice to Du Plessis because Du Plessis exposed him badly. So that kind of took a little bit of shine off the main event as well. So overall, let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.